Next question. So, do you think art should art inherently be political or have political elements? Or do you think art in itself, just making art, is political?
I think making art is political. Um, and I think when it's not, and as someone who does illustration, I can understand when someone has a client who's asking for something that feels really apolitical to them.
Mhm.
But I think that when you have the means of production in your hands to show the world what it looks like through your lens, that to me is it's a political act
Yep.
because what you're doing is you're refusing the idea that there is an empirical way that things are. And
Yep.
what you're doing in the act of creating your work, you're interpreting the world for others to see.
And making specific choices, right?
Right.
Sometimes some of the things we leave out, it's huge, has a hugely political statement attached to it, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah.
you know, yeah, I think sometimes we forget that omission can be, or silence can be louder than adding all these other elements. It's just what we don't say, and what we don't visualize can be super, super powerful.
Oh yeah. I mean, I just think, just as an aside, I'll say I remember I made my first trip to London in 2019, and we went to the National Gallery. And one of the first things I thought of when we walked in was how, um, there sure are a lot of most of the women, of course, most of the paintings in that particular section where we were, and throughout really, were of white people.
Huh.
And a critical mass of the women in the particular area where we were, these were paintings from, the 18th century, some in the 19th century. I would say more than half of the women were at least partially nude.
Hmm.
The men were very clothed, multiple layers. And when you think, what you include, what you leave out, there was a political statement being made
Yeah.
about what are the terms on which women become valuable enough to be painted.
Yep. Yeah. Wow. That's wow. That's incredible. Yeah, it's interesting too because I think about the scene from Black Panther where Killmonger was like, "Oh, all these it's a museum in England, but these are all artifacts from Africa or from South America or Asia. These are all artifacts that you've taken, quote unquote, stolen from around the world and you're displaying them, right?" So I mean, people don't actively or aren't outspoken about that enough, I don't think.
Yeah, yeah,
Like this is not your history. This is someone else's history. So it's interesting to think about that.
oh
Uh,
yeah. It's very interesting. I mean, I'm really interested in the repatriation efforts that are actually working, with particularly countries in the global South, um, getting their stuff back from
I
museums in
also,
Europe and the United
but
States.
also, I feel like it speaks to what's valuable and what's a
Hmm.
treasure, and why don't you have artifacts from your homeland. I mean, I'm sure there are historical museums and museums that have British or, things from the United Kingdom, but I mean, they're not touted. Like you have a huge exhibit of, the Egyptian kings and gods or the Chinese dynasty. So it kind of talks about, kind of really does speak to what's valuable and what's treasured. And it's just odd to me that I never hear anyone say, "Oh, I'm going to the British Museum to go see something from Britain." Never, ever.
Yeah. It's really interesting. There's that huge, they've changed the name of the gallery at the Met in New York, and it's an Egyptian building from ancient Egypt, and that's all really that's in the room. Um, and what I now when you're saying this, they have a lot of European stuff there, a lot of
Mhm.
European stuff, and they have an American wing. But in terms of an equivalent room that is set aside for a building that is European,
Yeah.
that there is nothing
Nope.
like that. And it
Even that
is
room. I'm sorry, even the room at the Met, I think it has a Pantheon. That's just one wing. That's not a whole suite.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, and I love the Met. It's one of the places I fell in love with art and
Yeah.
saw possibility, and they're doing some incredible work around making black and just reconfiguring their relationship to black art.
Yeah.
It's just wonderful to go back and see these incredible transformations. But it is, I remember going to the Egyptian Museum in Cairo like 20 years ago. And one thing you don't see at the Egyptian Museum is any art that's not Egyptian.
Hello. Exactly. Right. That's why I'm saying it's really a loud statement that nobody really questions.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Yeah, I've never heard anyone kind of articulate it that way, but it's very interesting. I love how you said that.
Yeah, these are the these are the weird thoughts that come to my mind at 3 a.m. Hey, wow. What about
What about
um
this?
so what are some of the challenges that you find when you're creating art? Or are there challenges to your art making practice?
Um, I would say time. I've never been a full-time artist. Whatever, well, I know what that means. It means that's your primary way that you occupy your time. But at a certain point, I decided to take art as seriously as my remunerative salaried job,
Yeah.
which has been a professor all these years. And so that I think is one of the challenges, making the time in a country that did provide arts funding, but not to the degree to some other places. And so that has been a challenge. And then, you know, um, other than that, I'm fortunate. And sometimes now that I'm an art professor, I just think, what a great um fit, or what a great experience to be able to be really passionate about something and have that in some, whether you're teaching it or making your own, to be the center of your creative life. And so I feel very fortunate in that way, but still time is one of the biggest challenges. When I was an English professor, one of the things we had to do was continue to publish books. Um, every 6 years we were supposed to have another book of scholarship. And of course, as an art professor, art making, illustration, that's what we need to continue to do. And so, balancing, but these are clients. It's different than academic publishing, having clients with whom you've signed contracts. And so balancing that along with your responsibilities to your students. And it's a pleasure. I mean, I love teaching my students. And so I want to do both of those things really well and really responsibly.
Right. Right. Hmm. So, segue into your art making process or practice, do you feel like, I know it has changed, but in what ways has your relationship with your audience or those that are purchasing your books or enjoying your art as a whole, how's that relationship changed over the years or shifted? Or is there a new dynamic to how you make art and express your art? Can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, and it's been a slow evolution over time, but I think the biggest change is just an awareness of people looking at my work. And when I first started making art, if people were looking at my work, I was usually there.
Mm,
And so, it was the Art of Living Black exhibition at Richmond Art Center, and they had a big opening. And that's when a huge number of people were at those openings, still are. And you see people walk up to your work and look at it. And so most of the work I always showed was local. Or at a zine fest, so I'd meet the person who was buying the work. It was that very immediate relationship. And then I started posting work online, and people would see work who would never meet me.
right,
Um, and then once, I started publishing illustrated books, then the notion is that there are people who will read your work who you will never encounter. And so um it's I love that. I love that it reaches beyond just what I can do. But I also feel a different sense of there was a kind of a freedom to just making whatever I felt like I wanted to make, and somebody's going to like it. If I like it, someone else is going to be liking the same thing. And I'm trying to maintain that same mentality, even though I want people to buy it. I want people to buy those books. I want people to want those prints.
Right.
And so, but I also want to remain true to my vision. Um, and my art has always been about serving the Black community. I mean, um, I know that how I feel about Black people is how a lot of Black people feel about us. You know, we love being Black, we love our community, our heritage, and we know that there are a lot of aspects of what's wonderful about us, and what has been hard that never get told, a lot of those stories. And so I want to do work that in some way connects us with those stories. And so I know that, and that's my primary goal with my work. But I do have more of a cognizance of wanting people wanting to sell books. And that that is I'm still trying to figure out what that means for my creative practice.
Hmm. No, that's fair. And I think one of the first times I met you was at the Art of Living Black exhibit that you held at Mills College, and I was a tabler, I want to say.
Oh,
Either
yeah.
that or when you were painting the 1001 Black Men, and had a you had an exhibit at I think it was Oakstop, maybe that was the first time where you
Oh,
had an artist talk and you were selling
yeah.
the individual heads. I still have those.
Oh, that was that place. It was a shoe store and a gallery.
Exactly.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And then soon after that, you started hosting the Art of Living Black, and I would table at those. And I do feel like I don't know. I think carefree is probably the wrong word to use, but I feel like I bought your work because there was such a unique sense of your own hand and your own truth in your paintings that obviously I believe it still happens. But then, like you said, when you add the element of being published and it's a book, you definitely want to sell books. You sort of have a little bit more. The process is a little bit more thoughtful about, like you said, who's going to read this, who's going to view this, and I'm not there to explain it, right? Or
Right,
who may have
right.
never even met a Black person. And so, what does this work say? How does this work speak to them? And I can kind of almost see the consideration. I feel like it actually has become more developed and more nuanced in your work in such a sort of artful way, but also in a more intellectual way. Like you're putting in little clues, context clues for people who may not be a part of the culture, where I feel like before, you didn't have to worry about that because you were there, like you said, or, it's work that is for us, by us. You love Black people. We understand that. And as Black people, we're supporting you. But like you said, when you put it in a book and you send it off to somewhere else, are they going to get it? Do they know? Do they have the cultural references? So I don't know. I think it's great. I think it like you said, expands your work in a myriad of ways that you probably consciously think about, but then just as visual people, we add those little pieces, like in case you don't really get it, and then there's text as well as
All
subtext,
right,
visual
right.
subtext. But I think that's part of why I like your comics or your zines because stuff is not explained, but your words are included in it as well. And you have a great sense of humor too. Those punchlines are good too. Like I said, gender queer or not gender studies, and the Bear anthology is pretty top notch. I like both of those.
Thank
Similar
you.
sense of humor, kind of ironic humor, and some of it's dry. The dry wit is good too.
I
Like
appreciate that.
you said, the nerdy part of it.
I can't help myself. I
Okay, and if there was a dream studio setup, dream
Mm.
location that you can imagine and create for yourself, what would a dream studio location or setup look like for you?
Ooh. You know, I would love to have um I mean, my true dream would have bi-coastal studios
Mm,
and be able to go
okay.
back and forth. But, just a studio that is not actually in my home, but will force me to get up, go somewhere, and have a kind of a daily go to work practice.
Right.
Um, I love being outdoors. That's one of the things I discovered in the pandemic. I did not previously understand that I like sitting outside, having a matcha latte and drawing. So I'd love a studio that had indoor, outdoor space and great lighting. That
Mm,
would be and lots of bookshelves because I try to bring history and literature it informs a lot of my work. So I need this. I need my books around.
right, right. Huh. All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up with one more question. Um, if you could only make one thing, if you had only 24 hours to make one creative thing, what would you make?
If I had 24 hours to do one creative thing, I would want to create an art piece that's big because I love big art. And I'd want to do an homage to some figure from African American folklore. Perhaps Papa Legba, for
Uh,
example. And just to use both real, traditional collage and digital collage images to just make a big, fabulous representation of one of the kind of mythological figures, or maybe not
hmm.
mythological, that we've created since being dragged here against our will.
Wow, that sounds exciting. I want you to make that now. No, because I was just talking about New Orleans, and you said Papa Legba. I'm like, New Orleans.
Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah.
okay. Nice. All right, so we're gonna wrap it up. I want you to give a big shout out to your social media, your website, all the new things you got going on. Let us know.
Oh yeah. I you can find me on and Instagram at Ajuan Mance. I use my real name on most of my social media. I'm on Blue Sky as well. And ajuanmance.com is my website, so you can find me there. I will be having a show at the Queer Arts Gallery on Lakeshore. It's the opposite end or many doors down from the Queer Cultural Center.
Okay.
I'm showing recent stuff and I'm looking to make a couple new pieces for that show. And that'll be most of the month of June. So, and then in July, because I like hot drinks. So there's a cafe that specializes in chocolate and stuff like that on College. And I'll have a few drawings up in there that I'm making specifically for that show in the month of July. So,
You do have a
uh,
name for the cafe?
I wish I did, but I completely forgot.
I'll get it
So,
and I'll put it in the description box
yeah.
below. Just email me the name of the cafe and I'll put all that good stuff in the description
Oh,
box.
and one more thing, I just want to
Sure.
mention, I have a comic about women's rugby in the upcoming Come Out and Play comics anthology. It's going to be out sometime in the next few months. It's great. It's LGBTQ plus sports, and I played women's rugby in college, and it was so
Oh,
much fun to actually do a comic about the rugby years. So.
nice. I'm gonna have to ask you for some of those pictures of the rugby uniform.
Oh, I've got him.
Nice. So thank you so much. You're amazing. I like your work. Amazing. Awesome. Thank you for this interview, for spending time. And with that, we're done. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. You are welcome.